Go live. Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to this live stream on self-care strategies and burnout. So we're going to have a bit of a discussion today. Hopefully it's an interactive discussion. I encourage you to leave a comment in the chat and let us know your experience as well. I'm really curious to hear if anyone has had some personal experience with burnout maybe. So let's see if we can keep this interactive today. We've also got some guests as well who I'll introduce in a minute. So let's get into it. So special welcome to Lisa and Beth for volunteering to have a chat today about this topic. I have found that this topic is probably the most universal challenge that autistic adults tend to come up against. So yeah, how about I kick us off with a question? What does burnout mean to you? Lisa.
Wow. Burnout to me means having less interoceptive awareness than I usually have, which is not always great anyway. It's exhaustion. I just want to be on the floor with my bunny. It's needing a lot of space, doing whatever I can to get back into an unforced rhythm and letting my brain recalibrate.
Awesome. Beth, any thoughts?
I'll just say that I'm happy to be here and I'm honored to be invited. But I fairly recently started to think of one episode I had as burnout. And it's true that it was just a mystery to me what had happened. It was right before I turned 30. And I'm fairly recently diagnosed. And so just reading about burnout, it started to become clear to me that what I had experienced was burnout. But I only had that one time when it happened to me. And so I'm not, I only have one data point to work from. So yeah.
I guess there's two kind of ways to think about this. One is like as a discrete, this is burnout, this is not burnout. I am in burnout, I'm not in burnout. Versus the continual everyday, how do I manage my energy so that I don't lead in that way. Wow, my words.
I think, yeah, I think, yeah. And I'm also talking a little slowly because I just am coming off a 2-hour-long work meeting. But I think that what happened to me, and I don't know if this is a common story, but I had a profession as a preschool teacher, and then I burned out, and then I couldn't leave the house, and I couldn't stop crying all night and day, and then it was for enough days when it didn't seem like I was having a nervous breakdown for any emotional reason, that after it finished, I just made a lot of adjustments in my life, and it hasn't happened again because it felt so bad. So I think that it doesn't happen to me usually in my daily life because I'm so sort of obsessive about if I have some crisis or something. I literally stop whatever I'm doing. If I have a health crisis in my family, I'll just leave things undone. It's bad because then I have to apologize to people afterwards, but I just will not even, I'll forget to call to cancel for meetings or something like that because I just know that I have a limited amount of energy. So I just literally triage and shut down everything in my life except for what must be completed. And so thank goodness I haven't had that experience again, but I'm lucky in my new profession, not a preschool teacher, that I can adjust that way. It's sort of like I was burned so bad that I'm so careful not to let it happen.
I'm curious about what you said around it was not a nervous breakdown. And
Well, I don't know.
What were your
I mean, I
thoughts
don't.
around that? Like, it seemed pretty clear to you something is weird and different is happening.
Well, I'm 53 and I've had like times in my life when I was struggling with things emotionally or developmentally or in terms of my identity or something. And it was just clearly not a time like that. It was like a really positive time. It was just that somehow the number of tasks I was doing at work in a new leadership role and then not cutting everything else out to manage that. Even if I had done that, I think I couldn't have managed this leadership role. But like, I wasn't aware enough of my limitations to be careful. And so then I reached this point where it was just very strange. It's one of these things with this diagnosis that's very helpful to me, is because then I can say like, oh my God, maybe that's what, instead of just walking around always being like, what was that weird meteor hit me in the head? And it could happen again because I don't know what happened. Like, I was physically healthy, I was emotionally healthy, and then all of a sudden I was unable to do anything but pace around the house with the, lights low. Like, that's all I could do, which I hadn't even, like, that, even just saying that that's what I did was one of the things that helped me to realize that burnout does seem to fit as a description of what was happening to me.
Yeah, and so what I'm hoping as part of this video is that by sharing some of these experiences, others who might resonate, it will be a little bit less hard to figure out what's going on. Like, if you've heard, oh, this does actually happen to some other people, then it sort of puts a little bit of context around it, which, Beth, as you were saying, sort of helps move on and move through it.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that I, too, Beth, wasn't aware in the past. And I've learned, you learn. I'm 60 and I was just diagnosed in October, and I'm a clinical mental health counselor. I'm a psychologist. Just wasn't on the radar as an option, But I think the worst time of burnout was leading up to that. And someone who I love giving me feedback about myself that was so crushing that I think for a year I couldn't get over it. I mean, I was obsessed with that feedback, and it broke me. It broke me. And it's what led to okay, I've got to figure this out. This is something. What is this? And then everything seemed to line up to say I need an assessment. But I was really, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think, and I had to just pare down everything to try to function in that. And part of it was grief, Yeah.
Yeah, that's something we don't always talk about, is like the second layer of how you feel about the burnout. or grieving the things that you wish you could do, but obviously is not possible at the moment. And you mentioned, working in mental health, and I think you also mentioned helping others with burnout or avoid burnout. How can you tell us? I'm really curious about that. Like, the concept of burnout wasn't new, but you hadn't applied it to yourself or something?
No, it's really interesting. And I think that speaks to the lack of sensory awareness I had, and I mentioned interoception and the inability to really, in order for me to recognize my emotions, I need a lot of quiet, I need a lot of art, I need a lot of time. Sally, I know the grief is it's amazing. I've for 38 years I've lectured on mental health, and especially because I train counselor educators, self-care or even soul care in some ways. And I always felt somehow, I don't know, somewhat, I used to say I become easily dissociated from myself. Like that was the terminology I used. Or I don't recognize, my own self in social situations. I'm picking up on everybody else and not sensing myself. But I had no understanding of this as an option of autism. And yet finding out that I have autism made everything in my life for 60 years make perfect sense to me. It was really important for me. So it's just interesting, the lack of self-awareness for someone like myself, Yeah.
It's kind of weird how it can be easier to understand other people than to see ourselves sometimes.
And as somebody as old as I am, there's not a lot out there. There's people talking about late diagnosed, but this is late diagnosed, And, when I think about my growing up years, and I don't know, Beth, if you relate to this, there was no talk of autism for women, and it was still thought of as just such a severe condition for a very small population.
And I read recently that actually early childhood teacher is a common profession for autistic women. And, like everyone on the math team with me was boys, and they all got referred to get tested. And I was the girl who was going into early childhood teaching. So like it was not a possibility, even though I was helping lots of children in my classes who were on the spectrum. It never, that was not what autism was supposed to look like, as the person who was taking care of all the younger cousins in the classroom.
It's so humbling, but it's so freeing.
I felt it that way too, just in these little pieces that I sort of carried with me that didn't make sense. It's very, we're social beings, and it's very nice to have something that, and for me, not so much grief, but guilt, as I felt very bad that I had let people down, and I just to have some way of thinking about that. Like I knew I wasn't lazy, and I knew I wasn't taking time off because I had a choice. I didn't have a choice, but it is helpful just to think. I'm actually sort of like I feel a little bit proud of myself that it was so extreme. I mean, I know it's not something you should feel proud of, but I felt like it was so bad that I was like, I really don't care what anyone thinks. I'm not going to do that again. I'm really not. Like, I'm going to find another job that doesn't do that to me, or another way of living that doesn't do that to me. And I have to say, like, I do see this so much through a lens of being privileged. Like, just I had access to get more degrees and to switch to being a professor. And I have to say, like, just to have a schedule where you're not like, when am I going to find time to go to the bathroom? But a schedule like I wake up and there's like one thing in my day, for 2 hours, and the rest of the day I can be like, now's the time when I have to take a 3-hour walk, or now's the time when I have to take a 2-hour walk, go swimming, and then walk home. Like it, but to just really think that that's like a human right for us all to be able to create our schedules in ways that fit our needs, and how few people have that now, and how much that's not necessary, that so many people don't. I mean, when I do my work with preschools in other countries, like teachers have 3 teachers in the room. They can take a break when they need to. So that some of the things that we need as autistic people can benefit everybody and are closely connected to these just rights of laborers. For me, it's been mostly the labor that's caused the burnout, not the home life. I've been lucky enough to have people who are accommodating, you know, if I want to pace, I pace or whatever.
I really like this word proud. I can actually really see that. It's like, actually, I'm going to look after myself. And that's a really courageous, brave, decision. Give us a shout out in the chat if you resonate with, feeling proud of yourself, or what's secondary pride like? Is there a word for that, Beth, when you were saying you're proud? I'm like, yeah, I'm proud of you for just taking it seriously. I don't know how better to describe it. It's like there's this serious, important thing, and you've treated it with an appropriate degree of seriousness and importance. Something like that.
Yeah, and I think there's another thing that I've also noticed is that since that happened, I feel a connection with people who have survived different really hard things. And I'm like, I don't know why I have that connection, because the kind of things that I've gone through aren't that kind of thing. But I actually think now, with this defining it as burnout and recognizing it as sort of this sensory overload, that I can see that it would be the kind of thing you carry with you, right? Like in a very bodily way, like all the time. You're like, well, that's not going to happen. But that means that every day when you wake up, you have to really be aware that you have that limitation. Yeah, a lot of shame. Like the shame as a queer person, I can just say that, yeah, the shame has some uses, but only if we encounter it in solidarity with other people and make something out of it. It's not good to ever sit by yourself and feel ashamed. But it's very hard if you're a hard worker and then all of a sudden you can't work, right? That's funny. I wish my students would say that to me when I go off at being a professor, and they don't seem to ever say preach. They say, what time is the class over? But I think that's what, I mean, I really like this, when I had the diagnosis and started looking at different websites, I like this about the autism from the inside. Many of the talks help us to feel that there's, even in the facing the adversity, the things that are hard for us, when we face them, that we can feel proud that we faced them and we went through them. It's not just like, oh, I have this superpower, I can pay attention or something. It's also like, and I made the world work for myself, right? Or not, I'm working hard to make the world work for myself.
You made the world work for yourself. That's really well put. I was thinking about the shame and just what you said. I think it's good for me, because of my executive functioning limitations, it's nice to have a list of things that unshame, because shame is so hyper arousing and it's just so unbearable. And then, Paul's videos are on my list of things to do when you feel shame, and I'm normal in this community, and that's so important, Yeah.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought of it like that before, but in terms of self-care strategies, we often talk about, things that help you relax or things that help you find enjoyment, but a list of things to help you get out of shame. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I like that too.
We should all have something like that. And I guess that kind of links, you use the word soul care. Like we talk about self-care and soul care. To me, I mean, everyone has different ways of seeing words, but it sort of encompasses a more holistic thing. It's not sometimes it can be helpful to think, okay, what are my very, very specific physical needs right now? Oh, I haven't eaten today. That's important. But also at a holistic level, like it's my whole self that needs care. And maybe that care is, listening to someone who makes me feel included, or that connection or something. So yeah, interesting.
That's sort of interesting too, for thinking about, like, I've just been reading more, and so, like, you could be thinking of like sounds that are bothering you, or certain ways of moving that are bothering you, or certain lights, but also there can be certain like negative emotions that can exacerbate everything, almost like the sounds are worse with the fluorescent lights. It's like because at this time when I had the burnout, it was like a really toxic homophobic environment, and somehow that combined with the adding a few extra kids to my class and having a few parents that were too demanding, and then the director leaving, and I had to take over the director position, like somehow that, could have been maybe possible if there hadn't been that fluorescent lights blinking of the homophobia. So it's sort of interesting, like that's something I've been learning from the community, is like that when we think about it as neurological, it's not. Yeah, I also really like this word self-care.
Mm-hmm.
I like what you just said too, Beth, that, it's neurological, because I think when we grow up and we don't know that we have autism, or there isn't a support community, it somehow feels, and here's the shame again, it somehow feels like it's like a character problem that we have that makes us feel ashamed, as opposed to this is a neurological, we're still on the human spectrum. You know what I mean? And I think we could be proud of it, like you said, just that this is who we are.
That word neurological gets me very excited. I'm like, yes, yes, yes. Because we are not really taught, it hasn't really been in our culture until fairly recently, how our neurology works. Even at a physical level, like I had a reasonable idea of how the bigger muscles in my body work. And if I exercise them regularly, then they get, stronger. And if I do too much, then I can injure them, and, various sort of physiological things. And one of the big things in my journey has been just getting an understanding of how neurology works. So to give a physical example, learning about, delayed onset muscle fatigue, muscle soreness, right? It means that I could have, I could notice that I've overdone it in my body 2 days after I actually did the thing. And I thought I was fine for 2 days. And then learning that actually that's really normal for that to happen. So just learning about the time frame for my neurology. So if I go out to a noisy social environment all day, I might think that I'm fine, and I come back home and I'm a little bit tired and I go to sleep, and then tomorrow I'll wake up with a migraine, for example. Or just how it builds up and how much time I actually need for it to mentally, neurologically reset. I can't just have a nap and expect it to be better. I can't just take 1 day off and expect it to be better. This is something I learned from taking like 4 months off last year. Depending on the level of fatigue, it might take days, weeks, months. In some cases, for severe burnout, it can even take years sometimes. And just recognizing how that works has allowed me to implement some very effective self-care strategies, like not working on a Friday or a Monday if I can help it, because it would be much better for me to work really, really intensely and then regularly take several days off in a row. Because if I take 2 days off, that's not enough time for my brain to reset. So I kind of need to listen to the biology of my brain. What does it need to be able to recover, to repair itself, to get back online? So anyway, I'm very excited about those things.
Me too. I just feel too in what you're saying, and even again, just feeling proud. There's that honoring, learning to honor and know who we really are. I think that the identity thing, because I think so many of us can sort of feel a little diffuse in our identity sometimes. But we're here and we need certain ways of being that we can really feel ourselves and honor who we are, if that makes sense. Honor our neurobiology and
Yeah, I was thinking about that in terms of my doctoral students and how they change. I just came from a meeting with doctoral students, like how they change when they get those letters after their name, like PhD, and then they're a doctor, like the Wizard of Oz. And I actually thought maybe for I read that autism used to be called like little professor's disease or something like that. Like if you could give every autistic person could get a card with their name with PhD afterwards, and then they could give themselves permission to just listen to themselves, because really it is like overnight you get the letters after your name and people are like, oh, doctor, do you need to not come to this meeting, or you're like an hour late to this meeting? That's okay. And in any other profession, you can't do that. It would be like great if somehow just by having the diagnosis, you could somehow take on an identity that had within it this permission to like have days without talking, or take many days off, or like spend your time in a dark room reading or just thinking first, right? And you don't have to justify it. Like permission to listen to yourself just because you have, oh, I'm an artist, oh, I'm a professor. Every one of us should somehow have permission.
And once you get those letters after your name, like that's it for the rest of your life, right? Like they stay there. So it's almost like it's a little proof of whatever it is. And then it's a part of you for the rest of your life. So if we could just recognize the value that is already in someone.
Exactly, that we all have the right to. Actually, there's this wonderful activist who I just Kate Bornstein. Anyhow, you can write to her and she gives you like a get out of jail free card. Like if anyone's told you you're going to, you're gonna go to jail because you're gay. I mean, you're gonna go to hell. It's get out of hell free card. Like if you're gonna go, if someone tells you you're gonna go to hell because you're gay, that can cause a lot of shame and obviously. So she'll just mail you a card that says get out of hell free. Like we could have like autism cards that you get mailed to you. That's like, you have all these, letters after your name. So you have permission to listen to yourself. It's part of your identity. I'm not entirely kidding about that. Like it would be great if like everyone just sort of got that permission to listen to themselves.
That strategy, I think Brene Brown recommends it in one of her books. Like if you need permission, literally ask your partner or your colleague to write you a note. And it doesn't mean anything to anyone except you, but you're like, oh, well, my mom wrote me a sick note. I can stay home from school today.
That sounds very useful. Yeah.
Yeah. And something that came to mind before, I don't know if you resonate with this, but somehow it can sometimes be easier to care for others or justify caring for others than caring for ourselves. Like I think, Beth, you were saying about going into like childcare and things like that. How do you feel about that dynamic of working really hard for other people and then trying to apply that to yourself as well.
I was thinking two things. The first being there's such a misunderstanding about autistic people, like we don't have empathy. And I think we have so much empathy. It's like we feel so much, at least some of us, we feel so much for people. And connecting that way feels in that, for me as a therapist, you know, connecting with people in their real selves and promoting identity and strategies to regulate hard things, it makes me stronger somehow, because it's like my calling. It reminds me to honor myself. You know what I mean? For me.
That's a really hard one, how to like care for yourself instead of other people, especially if you're socialized to care for other people. But I mean, I think the thing that we tell the preschool teachers, and I learned this from a wonderful Swedish preschool teacher, but you know, put on, you've heard it before, but like put on your own mask first. Like it really is true when you're looking at burnout that you can't take care of other people if you burn out. So like listening to yourself is the best way to take care of other people. I don't think I can ever learn to take care of myself first. That's a little bit asking too much. But if I tell myself that if I can't take care of myself, then I can't take care of other people, that it's my responsibility to keep going, then I can do it, I think. But that having the time to really listen to what yourself and figure out what you need. Like sometimes I read about the habits of like wealthy, famous, white, cis male, like famous people who have a lot of privilege, whatever the categories you want to look to, but and just see how they work. Like that's why I came up with the idea of like, you know, walking a lot or like biking a lot, or just giving yourself permission to do something that you really, really want to do, but to do it more than seems right. Like gardening, people are writing about gardening. Like if you're thinking of gardening as a hobby, you might be like, oh, if I garden for an hour or two, that's enough. But maybe you need to garden for 3 hours every day. And then you have to figure out how to do that. Like that could be the way that many of us should live, is in our gardens for 3 hours every day, right? Like how much is too much walking? How much is too much swimming? How much is too much pacing? How much is too much dark room time? How much is too much hammock time?
The other thing I really like about the oxygen mask analogy is that we have plenty of oxygen and we need it all the time, and we don't overdose on it, and we don't think about it. We just breathe in and out hundreds of times a day. And we would never think about it unless there's a scarcity of it. So if I have what I need for self-care, then it doesn't take over my life. It allows me to not think about it anymore so that I can focus on other things. So that helps me, that frame of mind. It's not that if I allow myself to go for a 3-hour walk every day, well, then I'm just going to spend all my time walking and I'm not going to do anything else. I'm going to do that until I have the capacity to do other things. And then walking is not going to be all that exciting anymore, because it's like breathing in. I'm not going to just sit and go, isn't this fun? I'm going to breathe in and get my oxygen. Anyway, that's a way that I like to think about it.
I really like that. I really, really like that. And it's so true. It's like once you get what you need, it recedes. And then, but if it's coming up again, then we need it. And it may not be the same as other people and their level of needing it.
I did notice that we all took a breath before when I said the word breathing. So I thought that was funny.
Yeah, the breathing is the best. Breathing is
definitely underrated.
yeah. There's a whole book I read
Probably
about that
10
recently.
times better than any other strategy and easier. I mean, it's not, not to be used in isolation, obviously, but like it speaks, like from a biological perspective, it speaks directly to our neurology to just take a deep breath. Anyway.
I have another trick that I've been using that I've not like. I like the diagnosis because it's sort of like being queer for me. It just like puts a name and then I can change how I see things. So I when I first came out, I would play a game where I just would walk down the street and sort of squint and just pretend that like every couple I saw was gay. Like just to see what the world would look like if the straight people were in the minority. I would just, go for a few city blocks, like squinting until I had seen a world where everyone was gay. So I do that now with the autism. So when I'm taking a 3-hour walk, I'm just like pretend that everyone's taking a 3-hour walk. And I think about how strange, some people only need to walk just like to the subway and back to their house. And that's very odd because the rest of us have to walk 3 hours a day, like as if it was like sleep. Like some people sleep 8 hours a day. So what if the normal thing was to walk 3 hours a day? I mean, there's nothing. It's all arbitrary, I guess, is what I'm saying, right? Like who said that walking shouldn't make up half your day? Who said that gardening shouldn't make up half your day?
It reminds me of a scene from a sci-fi thing. I have been informed that you require several hours sleep. Please do not be ashamed to do so.
Right, exactly. Just like that. Just like that. But it can work if you do it. If you do it with enough intensity for several days, then you sort of can start to feel like you're doing the normal thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, someone's writing about masking and burnout. That's something I've been thinking about, but I haven't figured out a way to think about that usefully yet.
So I'm thinking maybe we can do a bit of a switch to start talking about some self-care strategies and experience with that. So if anyone has a question that you'd like to throw at us in the chat, that would be helpful. The super chat function is also available, I believe. So self-care strategies, do you have any favorites?
Sleeping. I like to sleep a lot. Like 10 hours of sleep really helps me. Swimming, walking, and pacing and rocking.
I'm really physical too, Beth. It just totally gets me out of my mind and I feel myself again. I feel the boundaries around me and it's so good. Speaking of boundaries, I have these pillows in my office here, like that remind you, to have boundaries. I have a feelings one behind me, like, how do I feel? I think I feel, I'm afraid,
Yeah.
Because it's so hard for me to figure out what I'm feeling unless like everything's quiet. And I love to journal and color. And it just sort of connects everything for me. That's really helpful for soul care. Plus my bunny, Bella. Bella is ultimately my best friend.
I liked someone wrote in the chat, like, I'm obsessed with reality. Like that's such a great way of, I feel like that too. Anything that doesn't feel right, I stop and look and figure it out. But that's actually a huge one for me, is like to give myself time if I'm walking and I notice that like there's something in a pattern of tiles that's someone made a mistake, or some like in a railing, if like one piece is missing, like for me to stop and count which one it is, like not to try to keep going, but to just stop and count which one it is so I know what number was missing. that really does calm me down a lot. Moving furniture around totally calms me down. That's so interesting. I didn't know anyone else felt like that.
It wasn't in the chat for some reason, so it's really neat to. Oh, it's so nice to be with you all. I just love it. I love it. I love seeing your thoughts. Okay.
I think the time pressure thing is a big one for me. I don't know if it's a strategy as such, but it's something that I've noticed makes a huge difference. So if there's something that I need to do, even if it's a small thing, and even if it's not for hours, like let's say I have to call someone after work and it's only 9 o'clock and I've got the day off, but I can't call them until 7 p.m. Well, I have to budget that and think about it, and it just doesn't let me relax as well. Whereas having no time pressure for the immediate future just puts things, sort of allows that curiosity, Beth, that you were talking about. I can sit and look at this fence as long as I like, for 20 seconds if I like, or 20 minutes if I like. And I can just listen to how much is it drawing me in. And when I don't feel like it anymore, I'll do something else that I feel like. And something else, a strategy that works for me is telling myself that I'll do something for a relatively short amount of time. Like, I'm going to read a book for 20 minutes. Even if I don't feel like it, I'll just sit down, I'll just read a book for 20 minutes. And of course, I can extend that if I want. If I really want, after I get to 10 minutes, I can say, look, this really isn't working. I'm just going to do something else. But it's just a trick to get my brain to actually do the thing. Otherwise, what I end up doing is wanting to do a very, very limited number of tasks or activities that I can't just do one thing for 8 hours. It helps me to do one thing for half an hour or one thing for 1 hour, and then do something else and then change it up. So I'll read a book and then I'll go for a walk and then I'll make myself lunch and then I'll just stare at a wall for an hour. Whereas if I just stared at a wall for 8 hours, that would feel stressful that I should be doing something else. And I do enjoy the thing, like once I start it. So I'll start going for a walk and I'll enjoy the first 30 minutes of it or hour of it. And then after that, like, am I just going to walk for the next 4 hours? Or maybe I should come home and see what else I'd like to do. So having multiple things and just saying I'm going to pick a couple of things on the list can be really helpful. Do you ever feel like it would be really helpful for me to leave the house, but
I have to punish myself for that kind of thing. Like if I know it's something I have to do, like brush my teeth or leave the house that I don't want to do, I punish myself. Like then I have to not like sit in front of my favorite book without picking it up for 5 minutes or something like that. And I really don't want to be punished that way. So I brush my teeth.
So then you brush your teeth. But she was saying to go out of the house when you don't want
right,
to.
Like if I don't want to go out of the house, I have a promise to myself that every day I go out of the house. And if I don't, I don't have so much trouble with that one now, but that one has occurred to me as a potential problem, and it scared me that I could get to not getting out of the house, especially during like the pandemic. So I just promised myself that it's unhealthy not to go out of the house, and if I don't do it, I'll punish myself. But I know the punishing yourself only works for some people.
It does depend on the reason, I think. And I come across this a lot in coaching, is that every person has their own unique motivational system of what is going to work and what's not going to work. I don't think I could pull off your self-punishment idea, for example, Beth, right? But it works for you, right? And maybe it works for some other people who haven't tried it yet, and they'll go home today and think, wow, I've just learned a fantastic new strategy. So for myself, it's the deciding part that is the hardest part, because I'll second guess myself. Should I go for a walk? I think I should go for a walk. I know it would be really good for me, but maybe I'm too tired. Maybe I should just stay home. Maybe it's raining. Maybe I'll wait for the rain to stop. Maybe it's too hot. Maybe I don't want to have another shower today, and if I go for a walk, it'll be too hot and I'll have to come, Whereas if I just do it without thinking about it again, so decision made, I'm not going to think about it again. I'm literally going to focus on putting my shoes on and grabbing the keys and walking out the door. And then if I get stuck in a torrential downpour, it doesn't matter. I will deal with the consequences. Most of the time, the consequences are fine. I use this similarly. I used to ride my bike a lot around, just sort of commuting. And I would get caught in the rain, like really heavy rain, maybe twice in a year. And so I made the decision, I'm never, ever going to look at the rain forecast, because in Melbourne, you can't really tell if it's going to rain in the next 5 minutes or in the next hour. We have what we call showers, which means it's fine. And then for 15 minutes, it's torrential, and then it'll be fine again. And how do you know if you're going to get to your destination before then or after then, or if it's going to stop, or if it's going to keep going all day? So I just don't even think about it and just deal with the consequences if and when they come up, and they almost never come up.
I was just thinking about the person, forgive me, I so many more messages came in. I forgot your name. You were talking about, how hard it is to go out sometimes. And, that's a reality for a lot of people on the spectrum, because there's just so much stimulation and so many social interactions. And I think, first of all, to be really compassionate with yourself, and then figure out the things that you really value and want to do really badly, and then get support to do them. Have people text you, and maybe somebody can come over and go with you, or have a pet go with you. Or, there's nothing wrong that it's hard. It is hard. And you need support and compassion.
I've noticed a lot of the time, the real barrier is actually accepting that we need support. It's like, I know that to get out of the house, I need to call a friend and make a date. And I know that would be easy, but I don't want to have to need that. And so I don't do it. Something like that. So, yeah. Oops. Thanks, Sally. We also have this question. Are any of you familiar with PDA? No? Lisa, you were nodding a little bit. Or
that's the demand avoidance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Were you going to say something about it, Paul? You go.
I was mainly curious to see if either of you two related to that. I'm familiar with it. I notice some helpful traits, as in I find the concept of demand avoidance helpful to understand some of my own behavior. But I've also spoken to people who identify much, 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 much more strongly with it, to the extent that giving themselves, like, their own thoughts are a demand that get that trigger that. However, I've found something that helps me, and this is something that a lot of PDAs say as well, is that if there's a reason you're doing it, then it's not so much a demand, it's well, I want a slice of pizza, so I'm going to make that phone call to get it delivered. It's not that I have to make a phone call, it's that I want the pizza. So focusing on why you're doing it and what you want means that the actual task is secondary. I don't have to brush my teeth because mum told me to. Well, I want to brush my teeth because I want to have teeth when I'm 80, because that sounds like a really good idea. So anyway, that's part of my experience with it. And I guess that speaks a little bit to what I was saying before about each person's personal motivation system. And when you find something that works for you, then yeah.
I appreciate. Oh no, you go, Beth.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
I was just going to say I appreciate that you've been emphasizing that, because we are all unique. And I think we have to learn to sit with and explore compassionately what is going on in our minds and hearts, and then decide based on our values what we want to do. But I think that just honoring that for whatever reason it's happening, it makes sense. And you can listen to it and tune into it.
Well, that's a new I guess I had heard it before, but I don't remember acronyms very well. But like, I think I don't manifest task avoidance, but I actually spent like a semester I wasn't in school in college, primarily making like lists of rules for myself that I still follow, that like, you know, groups of threes of different rules. So like most of my day is actually like organized according to like, it's not a religion because I don't believe in it, but it's like as if I had a religion, but it's my rules, so that I don't have to think about a great deal of things. So I guess like, but I took the time to do that because I really felt I needed to, I guess. So maybe like sometimes if we could figure out, you're talking about these strategies, Paul, maybe it's like we have to give ourselves enough time to figure out what our particular strategies are and to really like practice doing them well, like just as if you were learning a musical instrument and you had to like figure out what part of it was hard for you, and then I'm gonna practice it till I do it well. So like really taking seriously that we can find strategies that work for us.
That's a big part of emotional intelligence that I try and convey to people, is it is about practice. And if you want to get better at self-care strategies, you can literally devote an hour a week or an hour a day to getting better at self-care strategies. And maybe that's sitting down for an hour and writing out a list, or maybe that's coming up with an experiment. Today, I'm going to have a hot bath and write how I feel afterwards. Does it help? Does it not help? And even if you're not actually, like, it's not necessarily practicing self-care, but it's learning how to spending time learning how to practice self-care on yourself. If that makes sense. So yeah, the practice is, yeah. Beth, the other day you shared a strategy that you had about thinking of yourself as pregnant.
Yeah, that's another of the ones I was telling you about, the mask. I mean, I have a lot that are related to motherhood, just because it was my profession for a long time, the early childhood. But so if I think of when I was pregnant, I was thinking of myself as this container, like growing this other person, and so it was a form of care to care for myself. I mean, I really did believe and do believe that it has some effect if I could keep myself calm. So I didn't have to understand why I was calm. I just had a serious responsibility to listen to myself. And that sometimes was hard. Like I had to not talk to some relatives who seemed to make me really stressed, even though that didn't seem very friendly. And I don't know why they make me stressed, like that kind of thing. So I try to sometimes carry that on, like to respect my body as a vessel in which I am trying to live myself, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about, Paul?
Yeah. Because it's a serious responsibility, like that you're taking seriously. And the other thing I love about that is you don't need to understand why. Like what's that like to know what you need or how do you know what would be helpful without understanding why?
For me, it's the when I don't notice things in my body, it's just very helpful to be like, oh, how fast is my heart going? Like, oh, are my hands tense? Like, oh, how's my breathing? Like, oh, am I thinking I wish I was dead? Like, that's a good sign I'm unhappy. But actually, like, or I wish I was asleep, or I wish I was somewhere else. Like if I'm actually thinking like, I don't mind if this goes an extra hour, that's a good sign I'm gonna have. Like if I can't tell, I can go by some of those very concrete. But I think also I'm just still big on this month. This is my thing that I'm big on. But like I'm sort of big on this idea of like remembering that everyone else gets a lot of help. Like let's say it must be hard for everyone to brush their teeth, because brushing your teeth is sort of like a strange thing to do. So like other people must have a way of making themselves brush their teeth. It's just like maybe it's that the dentist tells them to do it or something. But then they all have dentists telling them to do it. But we don't have that. We have to come up with our own unique ways of getting ourselves to brush our teeth. So that's even more reason we should let ourselves spend time developing our unique ways, because no one gave it to us. It's like we have to develop our whole cultures ourselves, right? Like our whole rhythms ourselves, when other people are given rhythms that really work for them. So that could take a lot of time. So we could really embrace that, just like slow development. That's the other thing I've been thinking about, is like at 53 or 60, or I've met a lot of people in Paul's social groups that are like middle-aged and be like, oh, I'm starting to get comfortable. And I study human development, and like, who said that we're supposed to be comfortable in ourselves at 20, 25? Like, how old are you supposed to be when you're, maybe it does take like half your life. I was reading that great book that I think Paul or someone else recommended about, what's it called? Like Look Me in the Eye or something, a classic, really fantastic. And just like really another story of like, oh, it just sometimes takes till middle age for like you to have developed enough of your own. Like if I have to develop all my own rules and all my own patterns of living my day, then of course it would take me longer to. There's a lot of brushing tooth comments. I don't know why the brushing tooth is like, that's like a big.
It's a pretty weird sensory thing that I can very easily see a lot of people not liking very much. A frame that I use in a similar way, Beth, is that for most people, like if the socially prescribed solution works for you, great. You don't need to do any work. You just do what your parents told you and it works. But if for whatever reason the socially prescribed solution does not work for you, then you have to go back to square one and find a way that does work. So how fantastic would it be if I could just work 9 to 5 for an organization. Great. That would be fantastic. And then all of my, not all, but a significant amount of problems would be solved. If for whatever reason you can't do that, then suddenly we are trying from the ground up to create a solution and a lifestyle that is just sustainable, which can take decades potentially to develop that level of self-awareness, as you were saying.
On the asset model, once we've done it, we've developed this beautiful thing that's unique. And what are we doing in this world if not building culture? So even if it's just a culture that works for me, it's still a beautiful culture. And I mean, really, it's like I can think of worse ways to use my time than making lists of rules for myself or finding out that I need to walk 3 hours a day, right?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Who just put that? Yes, about the water on when you're brushing your teeth. Yeah, there's a lot of problems.
This one. Yeah. So it looks like we have quite a few people with brushing teeth questions.
And laundry is hard too.
So I'm thinking we can wrap up pretty soon. Is there anything you'd like to leave us with? Any thoughts that you would still like to share, either of you?
I guess I would like to just go back to this idea of like preventing burnout not being an individual responsibility, but that like the more we can fight for everyone's right to have their own schedules and just that if you reach burnout, it's not your fault. It could be because you had jobs and responsibilities and lack of freedom.
And similarly, when we put all this energy into finding a way that works for us personally, we're actually creating culture and making it easier for others, especially the next generation, to find those things as well.
I'm just scrolling down and looking at what everyone's saying, and it's really good to put words to all of this because it's hard. What we're dealing with can be really hard and challenging, and just being able to put it out loud, like Sarah was saying, how do I justify doing what I want? When everyone else would also rather be doing what they want. And the world has, that's a real issue, right? And just how do we listen to our own souls and take care of ourselves? And because we value and we love, how do we take care of other things too? And I think we can. I think we can learn how to do that, and that it's worth the time and the effort to listen and learn how to do it for ourselves.
Yeah, that's my key takeaway, that it's worth it. It's a serious responsibility. It's valuable. It's worth doing. So much so that practicing self-care is something you can be proud of. Like, look how well I looked after myself today. And something we've said this in similar ways earlier, but I'm really feeling it in my life at the moment as well. The more I look after myself, it ripples out to other people very, very quickly. And when I do it well, sometimes people even comment on it. They're like, wow, you have brought a really nice energy today. that kind of thing. So yeah, I like to remind myself that it is a gift to the world to just take care of your soul. in a holistic sense. Okay, well, we might wrap it up there, but thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Beth, for joining this discussion today. And thanks everyone in the chat for making this such a community experience. And we'll see you next week. Thanks.